This is the all-star panel that we have right here as we talk about motor accessibility and inclusion. Let's get a chance to meet each and every one of them. Aaron, introduce yourself, my dear.
Hello, everyone. I'm Erin Hawley, and I have muscular dystrophy as well as anxiety. Um, right now, I work as digital content producer for Easter Seals, and I'm also an accessibility consultant. And I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. Aaron, we are delighted to have you with us, my dear. I am honored to be in your presence. I just want you to know that. Navi, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little about yourself.
Hi there. Yeah, my name's Navi. I play video games. I have multiple sclerosis and a brain injury as well as a result of a massive ischemic stroke I had a few years back. And that uh, means that I've come up against some barriers in the video games I like to play. So that's what brings me here today. I'm a digital accessibility specialist, and I work on making video games more accessible for people with disabilities.
Awesome. Navi, great to have you. I am honored to be in your presence as well.
It's nice to be here. Thanks.
Mike the Quad, my man. Mike, and you brought a companion along in the back too. Why don't you tell us about yourself and your companion in the back too?
Well, let me go ahead and introduce. This is my service dog, Pixie. First and foremost, yep, she's looking over at me, sitting on the cat bed. I'm Mike the Quad on Twitch. I'm a Twitch streamer. I'm a disability advocate for those who have spinal cord injuries, and I myself am a C6 quadriplegic. And I'm just here to tell everybody about accessibility in video games.
Hey, Mike, I am honored to be in your presence as well. I mean, being with fellow gamers, fellow disability consultants, game consultants, and just ones who live the life that we live. It is so great to have you. Well, Mike, it really is.
Thank you.
All
I'm
right,
glad to
gang,
be here.
let's do this. All right, so we have come a long way when it comes to gaming accessibility. I went back. I know Aaron and I was talking about this. I go back to the Odyssey game, so I am like so old. A ColecoVision, all the above, Atari, and things like that. And I became disabled when I was. I'll just say how many years ago it was. 28 years ago. So it wasn't a lot of options for me out there when it comes to gaming. But now we see this new innovation that allows us to game. And Aaron, I'll throw this to you first. How do you feel about the strides that we have made when it comes to gaming?
I feel like we've made so much progress, but at the same time, there's a lot to be done. And I feel like people think, oh, everyone's talking about accessibility, but that doesn't mean that we solved all the issues. We have to keep talking about it and making it known that accessibility is going to change along with the strides in technology and all of that.
I totally agree, 100% with that. And Navi, what about you? How do you feel about the progress that we've made so far? And Aaron, I forgot to neglect to ask you, how long have you been gaming, Aaron?
I've been gaming since the 80s. In the my first system was the Atari, so it's been a while.
Yeah, you and I are around that same generation, Aaron. That's why you and I can get along. We got to keep these millennials in line that we have with us, right? All right. So Navi, why don't you let us know how long you've been gaming? How do you feel about the strides we've made thus far?
Yeah, I've been gaming since the 90s. I'm one of those millennials. I think my first game system was an SNES, but I have an NES now still that I like to play. I It's really exciting to see the strides that are happening in the video game industry in terms of accessibility, especially as someone who wants to be able to continue to play games as my multiple sclerosis continues to progress. I'm really hoping that those strides continue, and I'm just really passionate about making sure that the industry doesn't that we don't kind of rest on our laurels and say like, oh, everyone's talking about accessibility, as Aaron says, and like that's enough. But it's not enough to just kind of talk about it and have it be a thing that we're all like, we care about it. I'm really passionate about helping folks in the industry make actionable change.
Oh, I appreciate that. That was our first mic drop moment here. That's what I'm talking about, man. See that's why when we get together and we have these conversations, ones who are like-minded and who have the same kind of struggles, we can speak real, we can speak truth to power, and that's what I'm talking about. So Mike, how do you feel about the strides that we've made? How long have you been gaming?
I've been gaming as a unplugged player 2 in Mario, back in the Nintendo days. But I remember playing like my first person shooter was Wolfenstein on the computer. And so we could kind of date myself on to that. I am one of the millennial gamers, as we were talking about. And with the strides of accessibility in gaming, I feel at least the last 5 years, we have seen a lot of progress. Progress which is a snowball, which we can turn into an avalanche, hopefully.
I totally agree. with that. And that makes a lot of sense. And Aaron kind of touched on this about like some of the barriers. I mean, all you have touched on this. And let's spend some time on talking about some of those barriers right there, because I noticed what happens is, and I do this a lot when I'm consulting on different games, and I make UX people crazy when I do this. So they say, Paul, how does this work for you? And I'm like, it works great for me, but what about my buddy who's a quad and only can move his neck? And they're like, I'm asking you, but I'm like, but I represent an army. It's not about me. I got to make sure it's good for me, but also good for the person who doesn't have that much mobility as me. So I drive them crazy. So when it comes to barriers out there, Aaron, what are some of the barriers again that you've noticed, no matter what platform, what console, PC, Xbox, PlayStation? What are some barriers out there that you notice that you want to speak on during this time?
Right. For me, the biggest issue is the amount of controls needed to play certain games. Like, for example, the Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I think it was. Was it Odyssey? Maybe. You should rebind the keys, but you have to use all the keys. So to rebind it doesn't really matter because I still can't reach, right trigger. So it's just like the complexity of gaming, and like simple is better and more accessible. And I feel like that's not really talked about, especially because they say, oh, you can rebind it. Yeah, but I can't still reach half the buttons.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I have that frustration too. And Mike and Navi, please chime in if you have any thoughts on what Aaron's talking about too. Let's go with Navi first. All right.
Okay.
Go ahead, Navi.
Yeah. In terms of rebinding keys and things, it can be really difficult, especially as someone who doesn't always have full use of my hands. I use a foot pedal system sometimes for gaming. It's called a 3D rudder, and it has very limited amounts of keys I can put, and there are limited amount of switches I can mount to my desk to be able to play with. So that's definitely something that I've come up against as well.
I totally agree. Mike.
Yes. Well, as a quadriplegic, and this is the limit of my hand function is, okay, I'm actually trying to move my hands, but this is the limit of my hand function.
We throw our paws in the air.
Throwing our paws up in the air.
What we do.
I'm totally okay with that. There's a lot of games, as we've seen, we're thinking about like how when Nintendo first came out, there's only a couple buttons that you would have to press in order to actually play the game. And as we have progressed through our technology in video games, we have added, I believe it's up to 18 buttons on at least just a traditional controller. Now, trying to press all these buttons at once in a game that's like a real-time game, say like a first-person shooter, can pose a huge obstacle, a huge barrier. Games that are turn-based, RPG games and stuff like that, that allows a user to, just take time to think what they want to do, and we don't want to limit what games that we can play. And as games have become more complex, it's starting to widen this gap on games that are playable and accessible. And yeah, I feel like we need to definitely talk about that and advocate for different types of options from the ground up when somebody's developing a game.
I totally agree. And Mike, you and I, we have the same functionality too. And I'm the same way, when it comes to like maneuvering things, multiple buttons, and like Aaron was talking about, why does it have to be that complex to, to do certain disciplines in the game? And Aaron and I, like, we go back to like Atari, so we stick button good, and the way that we see technology now is no reason why, with machine learning, with AI, with all this innovation, this explosion of innovation that we have, why we can't do that. And again, happy for the strides that we've had made. You look at some of the games out there that have put things in the software, what Naughty Dog is doing, what other developers are doing out there. It's really, really gratifying to see that. And that brings up another subject. I had a discussion one time with a game developer, and I was like, hey, who do you have working on your team? And they said, well, we have this person on our team. I'm like, well, that person is paraplegic. She doesn't have any hand problems, like someone like myself have. It's good to get us in that conversation too, building from the ground up. And like even with Navi, playing with her foot, all these different voices out there getting in at the ground up, or even like in the beginning of development, I think has really helped us to achieve that kind of goal right there. What kind of feedback have any of you guys have gotten when it comes to letting developers know when certain projects, and I know because of NDAs, there's only so much we can talk about the projects that we've been on, but have they been receptive to some of the input that you see the need for? And let's start with Navi this time.
Yeah. I found that working with indie developers is sometimes there's a lot less red tape to cut through every time you say, like, this is a change that needs to be implemented. Smaller development teams have a lot more power over the game and have the power to be a little bit more receptive to changes. They can just say, yeah, we're going to reimagine this game from the ground up. We'll start that right away. Whereas some of the bigger game development companies, there are processes and someone has to check with their boss and check if it lines up with the Gantt chart or not, whether or not we can still push things out on time. So I have found that it's really a dream sometimes to work with indie developers for that reason. But one of the things you touched on too was about how, someone who's a paraplegic won't have the same barriers that I will have, and someone who's blind or low vision won't have the same barriers. And I think that's why it is so important to have a variety of options for people for accessibility in games, not just like, this is our one accessible mode. There's less buttons, so now it's accessible. Or there's a colorblind mode, so now it's accessible. The most accessible games are the ones that have tons and tons of features that we can all pick and choose and say, like, this works for me, this one doesn't work for me, but I'm going to turn on this one, so that we can customize it really, really heavily and just have like a galaxy of options rather than like an accessible mode and a standard mode,
I totally agree. Go to the menu. If I want a la carte, I can order a la carte on the menu. You know what I mean? I love that. And Aaron, you want to chime in and give us your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I found that like developers have been very receptive. What I've come across as far as that is gamers are less receptive to it. They'll think it's like cheating to want accessibility and all this stuff, like get good, it's like, no. But developers, I found, have been very receptive when you say, here's the issues with your game as far as accessibility.
Yeah, I love that. And that kind of bothers me too, Aaron, when I hear gamers talking about cheating and things like that. And you know, I go back to like curb cutouts, right? Before there were curb cutouts, many of us who use wheelchairs, you know, we would have to go out in the street, right? You know, just to try to navigate traffic to cross to go to the other side of the road. It helped us out, but everybody use curb cutout now. You ever notice how many people who don't have a disability go down that curb cutout just like us? So you know, when these gamers throw that kind of shade like that, you know, it's like you don't have to use it. You know, nobody's forcing anybody to use those type of functions. If they want to use them, cool. But you know what, Aaron, on the DL, I bet you they're using them. They using them.
Probably. Yeah.
They just talking that noise, but they kind of using them. And Mike, let's get your thought on everything.
Yeah, the whole gatekeeping issue, I understand why it's present within gamers because we're competitive. As a gamer, we're always trying to see who has the highest points, who can do better, and with just whatever the game was made, like how it was developed. Our argument is inclusive design, as in trying to bring everybody into a game so they can enjoy this type of experience. You know, not all games are competitive. A lot of the games that I'm starting to see, especially with indie developers, are all about experiencing the game, the story, the characters, the art, everything that's like involved with that. And we don't want to be limited to not being able to play those types of games because there's some type of development issue with like the controls or something like that. And I feel that having these types of inclusive designs from the ground up, it allows this whole range of people that weren't probably even considered, not because they didn't care, like developers didn't care about it. It's this something that wasn't brought up to them. And, you know, I feel like it's something that all of us, you know, here on this panel and everybody else, you know, in the GA conference, it's up to us to give that voice, you know, to be those voices for everybody. And, you know, we're all different. We all have our, you know, different types of disabilities, physical disabilities, cognitive, intellectual disabilities, and having to put those into like having them considered, you know, is what we want.
No, I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. And you know, do you guys sometimes see? I think that we as a community, the disabled gaming community out there, do you think sometimes we're our worst enemy? Sometimes with just this conversation that we're having. You know, what's your thought on that? Because I sometimes I go on to Twitter and I look at all the chatter sometimes, you know, these tweet storms that it's like disabled on disabled crime and things like that. But you know, what's your view on that as far as a whole, how we're doing? Who wants to chime in first on that? And please.
I'd like to talk about that. The disability community is very diverse. There's people who are born with a disability, and there are those who become disabled through something like this motorcycle accident, like myself. And I feel like having this ableist mindset before does like it taints the advocacy of what we're trying to do in the disabled community, and being able to just be empathetic and trying to understand different perspectives is something we really need to learn. And at least for me, you know, that's something that I haven't thought about accessibility before I was injured. I was 10 years ago, you know, 2011. And I never thought about accessibility. You know, I rode a motorcycle and I parked in those, the hash mark lines over, you know, I was that guy. And, you know, being able to experience or, you know, quote unquote, being in somebody's shoes, you're able to like gain this new perspective, and it lessens this whole, I guess it's just for me, just trying to understand other people, you know?
Yeah. I get that. Because we're not a monolith. You know, I'm Black and disabled. You know, all of us are different nationalities, different genders, and we have different walks of life and different life experiences and things like that. And I think sometimes we can get into our proverbial fishbowl and our proverbial box, and it's all about us and our just experience. No, it's about all of us as a whole. We're a diverse community. I mean, we're the most loyal consumers out there. 30%. I mean, how many other blocks of the population is loyal than us? So we use our voice together. We can definitely make changes like we're making right now. When it comes to gaming and things like that. And Aaron, let me get your thought on that too, if you don't mind, if you want to jump in on that.
Yeah. So in the U.S., 1 in 4 people has a disability, and even within the same disability, there's so much diversity. And I feel like the term disability community is difficult to really understand and think about, because there's just so much different opinions and different even ways of how to play games. So I feel like we have to look also outside of disability to really reach true inclusiveness and diversity and accessibility. Because you can become disabled at any time. So it's not just about us,
Mm-hmm. I love that. And here's the thing that I noticed too, that when as more of us get in positions now where we can be a part of teams now. You look at some of the teams like over at Microsoft, some of the teams over at Naughty Dog, members who are part of us, who are now making decisions and being able to bring us in now and say, hey, these are some things that we need and we want. It's really gratifying that we've reached that point, but we need more of us in those positions as well. And Navi, let's get your thought, please.
Yeah, the first thing I thought of when you brought up, are we sometimes our own worst enemy, is how sometimes we can get a little bit almost tone policed by the rest of the internet, of people being like, look at this, that's already happened. Be grateful that exists. Be grateful for things like the Xbox Adaptive Controller. Don't be so angry. I've heard that before. And I think one of the things that is important for us all to keep in mind is that the reason that disabled gamers sometimes get up in arms when another game comes out and there's another discussion about like difficulty levels and just get good and all of this, the reason it makes us so angry sometimes is because it's a repeated issue that we're coming up against over and over and over and over. And every time we raise our voice about it, our voice might get a little bit louder. And that's kind of understandable if you think about it. And as a disabled woman, I'm not just fighting the fight for accessibility in video games, right? I'm fighting the fight for accessibility every time I go downstairs to get my mail and every time I try to vote in my local elections. And like, there are so many fights that we're always fighting. So sometimes the internet kind of mirrors back at us and says like, calm down, you're a little too angry about this. And I like to remind people that like there's a reason that we say these things with volume sometimes. And even like the intersectionality is so important to remember as well, because my experience as a white disabled gamer is very different than the disabled experience of a BIPOC person. Even just how angry I'm allowed to get is a very different amount of anger that I'm allowed to show online as a BIPOC person or a trans person. So it's important to like look at the whole picture and say like, yes, these people are advocating really loudly, but that doesn't mean we should listen any less.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's a very good point. And let's talk about consoles and PC gaming and some of those barriers that we see and how we can how we can work on making progress towards that. And when it comes to, let's take console gaming first, what are some of those other barriers? We talked about the controllers and things like that. And on Navi, you talked about some of the features in games, that are there that we would love to pick from. Are there any other barriers when it comes to console gaming that we all noticed? And if we notice those, let's see what some of the feedback that we can give those who are a part of this conference right now, because we do have a captive audience. We got the people in the room who can make the changes. So let's go ahead and chat with that. And you want to go first on that, Mike?
Sure. Well, with console gaming, there's the limitation of customization. That's probably the biggest thing that I've experienced versus PC. You know, PC gaming has a lot of other customizations. There's mods. There's a lot of things that you can do yourself or other people have done to enhance or just modify a certain game. With console gaming, when I first started, you know, it was really hard to find controller configuration on inputs and stuff, on just trying to figure out if I wanted to switch an input to put it on a different position on a controller, because I was trying to figure out how just how to utilize a traditional controller. And it wasn't until at least Borderlands 2 when I found out that they can, you know, you could switch different buttons to place them in different spots, and I was able to adapt to that. And yeah, that's like really the biggest experience that I've had, and the barrier that I've noticed with console gaming.
I agree with you on that, because I remember when I first started gaming back again, after my injury, I started off with a mouse playing Madden. I think it was Madden 98 or something, and you were able to. Don't throw on shade at me, Mike. I'm an old man, so no. Yeah, you know, and they had a mouse function where I can hike, I can pass, I can do everything with my mouse. And that really got me into wanting to game even more. And when we look at now with PC gaming, what you're able to do with everything, I mean, you have a lot more functionality than you do on console gaming. And I definitely get that, Mike. And Navi, you want to chime in on your take?
Yeah. One of the things when it comes to console gaming that's been a really big barrier for me, and I've heard a big barrier for other people as well, is like we forget to talk about affordability and the experience of a person who needs different hardware. So if I go out and buy, well, I have an Xbox already and I have an adaptive controller, but for example, if I didn't and I wanted to go out and buy an Xbox, I then also can't just buy an Xbox and start gaming. I have to buy a controller that works for me, like the adaptive controller. And then I also have to buy a bunch of switches, buttons, foot pedals, things like that. And then I also have to buy hardware to mount those switches to my desk or my wheelchair or things like that. And then I personally don't have enough function in my hands to mount those things and use the power tools. So I have to hire someone to come and work in my house. So you can see the cost for disabled gamers ends up being much higher than it is for gamers who don't need any accessibility features. That's a problem with PC as well, but it's a little bit more customizable, I found, on the PC, and a little bit easier to just like plug things in and find software to work. Whereas with consoles, I really think the cost of things needs to be considered because affordability factors in.
That's true. I know we've had discussions before in some sessions with other disabled members of our community. And there was a term that was thrown around called the disabled tax. That's like a term where it seems like we have to pay more for things that no one else has to pay more for. So we really have to find a way that, you know, it's not like we're doing this for customization because we want some 20s on our ride, right? We're not trying to make it look good, right? What we're trying to do is so we can play it. You know, it's not like it's a necessity for us. So we really got to find what we can do to make that possible, because many of our community, they're on government aid. They don't have a lot of money. So it hurts my heart that prevents some to be able to experience this wonderful thing that we all can do called gaming, you know? So yeah, that affordability is something that's definitely on our mind. And Aaron, let's get your thought, please.
Yeah, when the adaptive Xbox adaptive controller first came out, people were like, $99 is a lot. And it is a lot. But for me, before that controller, when I looked up like buttons and such, one button cost me $300. And I was just like, this is not fair. And it's not right that accessibility has this cost. And it's definitely, as you said, a huge barrier, especially since like a lot of us live on $700 a month, you know? So,
Yeah. And so let's chime in on how the software that's in game now, and how has that helped us, and what strides can we make in software now? And Navi, you want to start off with that one?
Yeah. For consoles specifically, or PC gaming too?
Oh, let's do both. We'll talk
Yeah?
both of them. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I think that I already touched on this briefly, but just having like lots and lots and lots of options is my favorite recommendation to make to game developers when they say like, how can we make our game more accessible? Often we're being asked that question, and I think people expect us to give them a checklist of like 5 things you can put into a game and make your program accessible. But realistically, just putting in as many customizable options as you can, options for bigger subtitles, smaller subtitles, volume, like things that you wouldn't even necessarily think have to do with accessibility, really do at the end of the day. So yeah, just really high levels of customization. I would love to see more of that in the software.
Yeah, definitely. Mike.
So that's definitely funny with Apex Legends has, the accessibility options, like specifically on this game. It's a first-person shooter, for those who don't know. And I know that there are a lot of gamers who don't have a color blindness, and they use a certain colorblind feature on there in order for them to see better while another character is using one of their powers. Because of the contrast of the colors, it makes it a lot easier to target your enemy, and it's pretty interesting with like the software that's in there. With PC gaming, I'm using a program called REWASD, and it essentially is basically input configuration program. So I'm able to use the Xbox Adaptive Controller and an Xbox Elite controller, kind of making a pseudo co-pilot, which is a feature Xbox coined for them to use 2 controllers to work simultaneously as one. That program, REWASD, has actually opened my PC gaming world up completely. And I've been able to play a lot of games that are in early access, the really hype games, the scary games that are out that they brought out. But, those developers haven't really considered, input, configurations, or even just colorblind or any type of accessibility features on there yet. But with having certain programs that are out there, it opens up a big window for those, at least for like physical disabilities.
Yeah, I totally agree in that. And I'm gonna chime in on what you said too, because I had the same experience like your friend had. I'm gonna chime on that. I want to get Aaron first. Aaron, well, let's get your thought, please.
yeah. So, what Navi said about customization and having options is definitely true. And one thing that people don't talk about a lot is, for example, I play on PC mostly, and the option to make a game played in window mode lets me use like the on-screen keyboard in Windows, and lets me use different other software to play the game with my mouse. So being able to change the window size of the game is definitely an accessibility feature that I don't think a lot of people consider.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Mike, to go back to you talking about your friend, same thing happened to me. I was working on a project, and I was having a hard time getting past this one level, and I was like, let me play around with these colorblind, features. So I used one of the colorblind features, and I was able to pass that level. Either one or two things, Mike. Either I'm colorblind, or that helped me out too. So I definitely get that, and that's one thing I find myself doing too. I'll dip around into the vision, into the hearing impaired features, just to just to check them out, take them out for a whirl, because it makes gaming more inclusive and more fun for me. So yeah, I definitely get that. And when it comes to like this whole topic that we're talking about today, what is one thing you really want to get across to those who are listening and watching our panel right now? What is that one thing? Mike, you want to go first?
I think the biggest thing is we were talking about with like Navi, it's like how loud we can be. Don't be apologetic on how loud you are about advocating for an inclusive game, for accessibility features. In order for us to be heard, sometimes we have to really be loud. And the gatekeeping, we want to play video games, sometimes just to play video games. We don't want to be the best pro gamer for a certain video game. Sometimes we just want to just play this game. And really, I guess this would be a call out to the developers that are watching this, that prioritize accessibility and inclusive design in your game from the foundation. Because if you have that strong cornerstone, your game is going to have a lot of longevity. You're going to include so many people that you haven't even thought that would want to play your game. So, and that's really all I have to say on that.
No, I appreciate that, man. And Navi, we got your back. So be as loud as you want. We got you. If anybody throws some shade at you, just at me and at Mike and at Aaron. We got you. All right. So don't even sweat that. And Navi, what's something that you want to let ones know who are listening right now, just about motor accessibility and this topic in general?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I come up against, even just in my daily life the most often, is that people don't have a very good understanding of the fact that disability isn't static. It's not like you're either, for example, it's not that you're either in a wheelchair or you're out of a wheelchair. I've often had people be like, what? You just stood up from your wheelchair? And it's like they don't understand that some people have some days that they can walk a little bit, some days that they can't walk at all. And it's the same thing with my motor function. And that's why the heavy customization is so important. And knowing that there's not just one accessible mode you can create that's going to work for everyone all the time. Because honestly, with the way that my MS fluctuates from day to day, if I'm tired, if I'm hungry, or if I'm in a relapse, my hands might not be able to function at all, but other days they might function incredibly fast. So it's not possible to have one accessible option that works for everyone, because it's not even possible to have one accessible option that works for one person all of the time. And a lot of people don't realize that our disabilities can fluctuate, and that level of customization is so heavily important for all of us.
Yeah, another mic drop moment. See, Navi, you are spitting some really good knowledge for us here. I really appreciate it. All you guys are. You and Aaron and also Mike, you guys are really giving some good insight out there. Even like someone like myself, who's a part of our community, who does our line of work together. I'm learning a lot from all you three, and this is awesome that we're able to have this conversation. And Aaron, let's get your thought, please.
Yeah, I think that accessibility benefits everyone. As we've all mentioned, anyone can use accessibility features, and I feel like developers should really consider that, even as they're just thinking about the game they want to make. Because so often I'm pulled in as a consultant after the game is done, and I'm kind of like, why am I here?
Yeah.
But I think it has to be done right from the start, and
Yeah.
that way it's easier to implement.
I totally agree. And hopefully the next go around they'll get us there in the beginning and not when it's over. And
Can I just jump in on that really
absolutely,
quickly?
yeah.
Another thing I think developers don't realize is not only is it easier to implement, it's way cheaper. It is so much cheaper in the long run, often I've been told we can't afford to undo all the work we've done. It's not in the budget now to implement this. And even the small implementations that we ask for, people end up having to redo a bunch of work, and it costs money. So developers, if you bring us in sooner, if you start from that foundational place of having an accessible game from square one, it's going to be cheaper. So
Yeah, see, you messing up my hustle, Navi, because when I get on a project in the beginning, I'm like orange M&Ms, Perrier water. I need my so you messing it up for me, Navi. Stop. And I know there's some developers out there who are listening and watching right now are wondering, hey, are you guys going to talk about mobile gaming and VR? Yes, we are. So I wanted to get that first, talking about console and PC gaming, and now we're going to delve in for a little while of mobile, VR, and our take on that. So let's talk about VR now. What are some of the challenges that we personally face trying to use VR, especially with our motor issues? Who want to go first on that? Mike, you want to go? Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. So definitely, the joysticks. I think the only VR game that I would be able to, that I would just more consider on playing because it's I'm not using the buttons is Beat Saber. All I have to do is just once I get the controls into my hands and fixate them and strap them on there because of my grip is not as strong, when I'm trying to swing things. VR is it's a very interesting thing. I've talked to people about what they can do to include people who have like motor issues on manipulating their controllers. And one of the suggestions was just hand gestures and being able to customize those hand gestures. Because say for me, I have this is my arm function, right? I can move my arms basically like that. Not everybody has that. So trying to configure arm gestures or movement gestures to whatever function it is for that video game is something that VR developers need to consider.
I totally agree. And one of the issues I have in VR, maybe you guys can chime on this too, is that when you have to set it up, right? They say here, draw this line or this circle right there. So I can't do it because Mike, you and I, we got the same struggle. So I'm having my wife do it. I'm like, no, dear, you have to do this way. No, you got to be over here. You got to be over here. And it's just really tough trying to set up that barrier of your play space. And Aaron, have you had any frustrations with VR yourself?
Yeah, so I can't use VR as it is right now because it's not just about like using my hands, but I can't turn my head or move my neck at all. So like any type of VR experience has to be something where you don't have to turn your head. And that's like not much, So at that point I just don't use it because I can't. And I feel that it's being talked about more, which is great. So
we're gonna give the developers a freebie right here, okay, guys? This is the only freebie we're gonna give developers right now, okay? There's technology out there with artificial intelligence and eye gaze that can definitely help out. That's the only freebie you guys are gonna get right now. Navi, what is your take?
Yeah. Oh, VR gaming is so frustrating. I want to do it. I want to do it so bad. I have a Quest headset and there are some games that I love, but I can only do VR on days when I have like pretty much full motor function of my hands and legs, which is almost never. So it's really, really frustrating. And one of the things I think people don't really realize, I was at EGLX once and went to demo a VR game before I ever even bought a headset. And the developer came out when I started having this one problem, and he was like, I had never even thought of this problem. But VR games, a lot of them don't even let me play from like square one. I can't even play the game at all because I'm considered too short. I'm 4'10" when I'm standing, but in my wheelchair, I'm like 3 feet tall. So it'll tell me stand up. And I'm like, I can't stand up. I'm in a wheelchair. And so it'll say that I'm too short to interact with the game, and that doesn't make any sense. There are also a lot of games where you have to be able to move around your space and do things with your hands. If I need to use my hands to push my manual wheelchair and then turn to shoot something in Super Hot, I can't. I'm like shooting my guns at the ground while I'm turning, and then I'm shooting. So there's got to be better ways. And like you said, the eye tracker technology is out there, gesture technology, like. I think this is just something that people haven't thought through yet in VR gaming, and it would be really cool to start that conversation being like a constant thing in the VR. Because right now it kind of feels like VR is just something disabled people don't get to do, and that sucks.
And you know what, Navi, that's the only freebie they're gonna get. No more freebies for them, okay? But you know, I'll tell you a funny story, and hopefully that developer is not on watching this right now, because it was E3. Had to be like 6-7 years ago, and this guy was like, here, try our VR. I was like, it won't pick my wheelchair, but it won't do that. So he goes ahead and hooks me up, right? So he started driving my wheelchair for me, right? So drove my wheelchair. He ran himself over. He messed up his own display.
Oh no.
And I was like, dude, I told you, man, it's not gonna work. So, and the thing about it, I love VR, because at E3, that same E3, this guy said he put the Oculus on me, and now I haven't at that time I hadn't stood up in over 20-something years, right? So he had me like on the moon, and he's jumping me around in the moon, and I felt butterflies in my stomach for the first time in almost 20 years. That's experience right there. We're really not able to really experience to the full because of the barriers that we have. I mean, VR is so incredible. And if we can get to the point where we can get that just straightened out and the way that we can use it, I mean, guys, that just opens up a whole new world. Imagine like you getting a fastball from Clayton Kershaw and playing baseball. You know what I mean? It's like, see that I'm excited, as you can tell about it. But let's move on, because we're almost running out of time, and that is mobile gaming now. So what are some of the barriers that we have on mobile gaming, and what are some things that can make it easier for us? And we'll start off with you, Mike.
So mobile gaming, that was actually what I started out as after I got out of my rehabilitation, because I didn't think I could play, controller games, console games like that. So I played, Clash of Clans. Very easy, I can touch it. I usually use like the knuckle of my pinky in order to manipulate and select certain things. Well, there's other games that are starting to be developed out there. PUBG Mobile, that came out, and it's a first-person, third-person shooter. And what I had to do, at least for myself, was I used two styluses and I fixated them on my hands. And so I was able to manipulate the controls, and I was able to, play fairly well. And what's really nice about PUBG Mobile, at least from what I found, is that you can resize certain buttons, like if you want to like make your joystick a bit larger, if you want to make the shoot button, in a different position, like you can literally map it out on that screen. And I played this on the phone. It'd probably be incredibly easier on a tablet because you got more room. Mm-hmm. But when, I feel like when developers are making these games, they're making it to where you're holding it like this, and then using your thumbs and stuff. Now, I can hold this, but manipulating and being able to press the buttons, it's something that, my competitive self says, I'm not going to be able to play this game. Even though I can play the game, I just want to be able to play it to the capability that I know that I can play a certain game.
Yeah, that took me back, Mike. I see. Mike, you know what a wrist ribbon is, right, Mike?
Yes.
I used to have two wrist ribbons, and that's how I would type on the keyboard trying to play battle chess back in the day. So with the stylus that took me back there and everything. But yeah, very good point. And Navi.
Yeah, one of the mobile games I play a lot is Pokemon Go, and it requires you to get out of the house and do stuff. And when
Now
the
you
pandemic,
you didn't get hurt, right? You didn't get hurt, right, playing Pokemon
no,
Go, right?
not
Okay.
yet,
Okay.
not yet,
All right, just
but there's
checking.
been some close calls, I guess. When the pandemic kind of hit, they increased the radius of stuff and made it so that you could do stuff from home, and made it so you could send gifts from further away from people and do trades from a little further away from people, because they didn't want everyone like grouping up in parks and grouping up at places. And that really opened up the world to me, because I can't just like walk around all day like other people can. I get tired out in my like manual wheelchair. And now that the pandemic is like winding down, they're talking about, and other games that have this same AR feature, the augmented reality of like walk around and go get these steps and things. There's that, like, I can't get steps, as it were, you know, and I can't. So hiding things behind this like wall of being a certain level of physically able in games, I was really excited to see that go away in a lot of games to accommodate the pandemic, and I'm sad to see it coming back. They're saying like, oh, we're going to make it so that you have to go back out to Pokestops to get things, and other games are doing it as well. I don't mean to single out just Niantic, but these games have shown us during the pandemic that you can make it accessible for people to play more remotely and not change the experience of the people who want to go out to a park and meet up their friends at a Pokestop. So it would be really cool if developers remembered that, like, especially of these augmented reality games, that like not everyone interacts with the world in the same way, and that doesn't have to affect anyone else's gameplay if you let us play too.
That's true. Get us in on the beginning. Let's, you know, we'll forgo our orange M&Ms and Perrier water. Just get us in there. You know, we want to help. And Aaron, let's get your thought.
Yeah, I can't really play mobile games just because I can't hold the phone out far enough to see it and to reach it. So I'm old. So to me, I'll just play games on my computer, and mobile gaming isn't for me, not even just because it's not accessible, but because I don't know, it just gives me a headache to look at that tiny screen to play gaming. But it should be accessible.
I
That's
totally,
me. Yeah.
I totally agree. And developers out there, if you're from the mobile platform, your mission in life from now on is to make mobile gaming appealing to Aaron. If you do that, you guys have done something amazing. Because I'm kind of the same way, Aaron, when it comes to mobile gaming. You know, it's, you know, I'll play like some games like Mike was talking about, where I could just use my thumb to press down and things like that. But if it becomes too cumbersome, if it becomes too frustrating, then I'll just go to the console, to the PC, you know. And it'd be nice if I had that option as well too. Well, in closing, my dear friends, 5 years from now, what would you guys personally like to see when it comes to accessibility, inclusion, and making gaming truly inclusive for all? And Navi, why don't we let you go?
Oh, I would love to see it become the standard in the industry that development studios have not just one person, but a team of people who work on diversity, equity, and inclusion within the company, and that a big portion of that be accessibility within their games. Because I think it's important to have a cross disability lens when we look at accessibility, and make sure that we're reaching as many types, people with lived experience of as many types of disability as we can. So just asking one person to do this job is not enough. But yeah, seeing it be more the standard, even in the past 5-10 years, I've seen way more people being hired like I am to work full-time with one development studio. It used to just be consulting work that we could get, and now there's starting to be little. So I would love to see that expanded to bigger teams that have a very intersectional and cross-disability focus of inclusion.
Yeah, isn't that a great time that we have now, where we can be hired, things like that? I told a friend of mine, I said I might retire from the media and broadcasting and go straight into to gaming and accessibility, be accessibility brand ambassador. I mean, it's a really cool time that we definitely live in. And Mike, your closing thoughts too about 5 years from now. What would you like to see?
Oh, well, I definitely agree with Navi on having accessibility teams that are made up from people who have a wide range of disabilities, or at least be able to access people like us to, you know, for the alpha process or the beta process in developing their video games. Like, I want to commend also like Xbox with their Xbox Adaptive Controller. I know that they're not making money off of that controller. And I would like to challenge more tech companies to focus on morality over money. That even though a product isn't going to make you money, it's going to bring more people into their ecosystem. And don't be afraid to have to try something out and possibly fail, not make money off of it. In the past, there has been consoles, the Jaguar console, the Dreamcast console, Sega, you know, that is Dreamcast. But, you know, don't be afraid to make these, to take these chances and try to develop these types of technologies that would include, you know, basically 10% of your top population, of the world population.
Yeah. No, that's real talk right there, Mike. You know, do something for the greater good. And, you know, and hearing you and Navi, you know, talk about how, you know, putting more of us in these roles and being part of the team, you know, kind of reminds me of like back in the days when they would say, oh, we have a black that works with us, or we have a woman that works with us. You know, no, you need more than just a black and just a woman. You know, you need more of the community there to really get this inclusiveness and some really good feedback too on these projects. And Aaron, let's get your closing thoughts. 5 years from now, what would you like to see?
I would like to see developers and gamers understand that accessibility isn't getting from point A to point B. Accessibility is an ongoing process that should never end, because accessibility isn't one thing. And as technology continues to advance, the need for accessibility will always be there.
Well said. And I don't think my closing thoughts can be as good as you guys, but I'm gonna try right here. And I would like to say to ones who are listening and watching right now, imagine a world where you were not able to game. What would your life be like? What if when you played your game, you had a frustrating experience? What if you weren't able to really experience an amazing product that some of these teams are putting together? How would that make you feel? I think if you think in terms of that, I think you would really understand where we're coming from. That all we want to do is be able to play, and our friends to play too, who are part of our community. We really want to strive together to make this gaming experience inclusive for all. And we can definitely reach that goal because we have some great minds. And with you in our corner, we can definitely achieve this. My friends, it's been great chatting with you. Thank you guys so much. And you guys are so awesome to the community, so awesome to the gaming community, the accessibility world. You guys keep on shining and keep on thriving. And you guys take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See you later.